Every experiencer has to overcome ontological shock, and we have to do it while the world tells us we're crazy. Because of this, each of us has our own story, our own helpful perspective, our own set of tools. These are the stories we share in the Experiencer Workshop.
So I had a really interesting conversation with a guy in the Discord this morning. I don't know his real name. I'm maybe put it in, the introduction page, but Burgers is his username. Yeah. But it seems to be a common theme. People struggling with their spirit, their religious beliefs, I should say, or their dogmatic beliefs. And then this thing happens, and then everything that they've ever believed or were taught is, put to the test, like really. So for him, it was Christianity, which was that was my upbringing, was very, very deep Christian roots. I was, my mother was born again. Born again Christian when I think I was like 5 or 6, and then started taking all of us to a Baptist church outside of Philadelphia. So, and then I was baptized at the age of 12, and then kind of got away from it, and then got back into it again at the age of like 20, I want to say 23, 24, and was baptized again, and then got away from it. And then, kind of did this whole wishy-washy thing with Christianity, and, the whole lather, rinse, repeat of, sin, guilt, forgiveness, over and over and over again. And then, and then this thing happens. But what was interesting was, having the dialogue back and forth between him and I, and the mind really gets torn in two with this whole thing, because, with the Christian mindset, it's a versus, it's a battle, like I really have to fight this thing. And, like what we were discussing earlier, when you try and fight it, it just kind of exasperates the condition, and there's no, there's no winning, with just like, willpower, I guess willpower may not be the best choice of words, but, there's no running from it, I guess is the best way to put it, because that for me was very, discouraging in the beginning when this happened, was praying, because of course I immediately returned to my Christian roots with this thing. And, Jesus, help me, save me, God, but, this whole thing, I'm sorry, please forgive me, won't ever do it again, that whole thing. And then to just be laughed at and mocked, and, Jesus doesn't care about you, and Jesus isn't here, and how dare you, and then, now where I am now with this, to have almost like this, reverse thing where the voices will start proselytizing, and they'll start praying over me in the name of Jesus, just take like a complete flip role, like really, they really screw with your mind, like big time. And I was sharing the story with you, I get these anxiety attacks with these things, and they're all, and they used to be like, if you can picture a tornado, and how at the bottom of a tornado, it's very tightly wound, and then it kind of goes up and funnels out. And when this thing first started, it was a very fast cycle. I'd go through these bouts of confusion and anxiety, with my beliefs and my associations and my upbringing very rapidly. And I'd go through these bouts of confusion every other day, every 3 days. And these attacks, like a regurgitation of years, of decades worth of accumulated, emotional baggage. And, and then it prolongs. And now it's maybe like once every 5 or 6 months. And I just went through a cycle again, and it just so happened to coincide with the full moon. So 2 days ago was the full moon, and 3 days ago was the full moon. And that's kind of when it started. So I woke up yesterday morning, and I could tell that a song had been playing on repeat all night. All night. It was one of my kids' nursery songs. I'm so happy. Jump, clap. I'm so happy. Jump, clap, spin. And, so to have, and you feel like you're being mocked. So I'm being mocked with a song that says I'm so happy over and over and over again. And behind that, on some, coinciding with it, but kind of in the background, behind it, underneath it, whatever, I can hear the male voice that I hear going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Over. And then I could tell that this shit had been going on the whole time I'm sleeping. Right. So I wake up to this and immediately I focus on it instead of ignoring it, which was my first mistake. Because when you focus on it, you focus on the absolute absurdity of the circumstance. And then that turns into rage immediately, right? As soon as you focus on how just unbelievably unnecessary and ridiculous this whole scenario is, and you want to choke somebody, and you want to choke somebody. And once you go down that, once you put your focus, your mental orientation towards that, that's when the anxiety, builds, and the hatred and the anger and the rage and the bitterness and the, the grudge, So, now normally in the past I would scream, shut the F up, just screaming. And then it kind of turned into this, almost like it would go through my body. Like I would just feel it like this kind of tension go through my body and just release like through my pores. And then, so then like yesterday, it was kind of that same thing. That's where I'm at with it now. When I put my focus on it, and it comes across as like an anxiety attack or a panic attack. And then it lasts maybe like 5 minutes, and it really drains me of my energy and takes my breath away. And then I move on with my day, and then that's it, and then, quiet again, and then it goes into like a wane period, but that's the wax period for me. It's always been that same wax and wane thing for me, and so then I'm reminded of, most of the world's spiritual leaders that we've had, and the immense amount of confusion and stress that they, had undertaken before entering into some sort of a ministry or awakening or enlightenment period, and so you have Jesus, who was fasting out in the desert for 40 days, being tempted by Satan. And the voices will say the same thing to me. How much money do you want? Right? They say the same thing to all of us. How much money do you want? Your acting career is on the way. You're, all these like very glamorous things, are you going to play the lottery tonight? Like, that's a big thing. Like, well, shut the hell up. It's like all these go away, So, and then, he was tempted, and then it says at the end of his temptation, after the end of that 40 days, he was comforted by angels. Angels came and comforted him, and there was like this relief for him. And then he started his ministry. And then the story of Buddha with him sitting underneath the Bodhi tree was, it is written that he was under so much stress in his meditation that sweat began dripping out of his pores. And it got to a point where he had to crush mind with mind, is what the Buddha did. That's how he handled it. And then he had his enlightenment, and then his awakening. And then he came down and started doing his ministry. L. Ron Hubbard was hospitalized and diagnosed with schizophrenia. We see a lot of this. Nietzsche, hospitalized, probably diagnosed schizophrenia, but he died, I believe, in a psych ward at the end of his life. He was sent away for the last few years of his life into a psych ward and never came out again. And, who else? I mean, gosh, the list. Oh, Joseph Smith, same thing, was under an immense amount of confusion. What religion is right? What is the right religion? What is the right religion? And then all of a sudden, boom, the angel, Moroni appeared and took him to the golden tablets. And then, so there's always these like this bout of mass confusion and frustration and anxiety that a man's mind or a woman's mind will go through, where they put everything that they have been told and everything that they have come to believe about why they're here into question, right? And then there's that relief. Oh, and then they're shown something miraculous, and then they're comforted. And with the phenomena that we face, and the phenomena that we're subjected to, I've really come to not take the release and the relief as confirmation of anything, right? Because it's a false sense of confirmation, that relief. It really is. Just because there's a release of pressure when your brain is in a pressure cooker and whatever this thing is pulls the pressure relief valve, that does not mean that it is truth. It just means that you've gotten some relief after you've been funneled through the tornado, What does matter, what really matters, is what holds up during the wax and the wane period, right? What holds up while your brain is in the pressure cooker, and when it's not, what still remains true, right? Because that's what really matters, because you'll put everything into question through these bouts of confusion. And then during the wane period, you'll feel a great sense of relief, and then you'll go into the wax period again. And does that withstand, does that still hold true? So, if you can look at it the same way that you view the high and the low tide, and when the high tide comes in, and it brings up all the shit from the ocean and it just throws it up onto the beach, right? And then it washes away, and then you kind of go and inspect all the seashells and the sea life that came up. Like, you really have to look at it. Like, what's valuable? What's worth holding on to? What isn't worth holding on to? What can I take into the next high tide with me? Like, what's actually worth salvaging here? And that's what really, really matters. And at the end of the day, after all the wax and wanes and the anxiety and the bouts of all of it, still love, Tony, love prevails every single time. You just can't. You can't deny the cultivation of love and our spirit and what it means to our spirit, and being able to transform the suffering into love, and being able to utilize the suffering that we go through to empathize better with another human being, and then help them get through their waxing period in life. That's the only thing that I find to have of absolute value. And every major world religion has a different name for their version of love. And in Buddhism, it's metta, and in Christianity, it's agape love, unconditional, and metta kindness. And then in Jainism, they have a sort of love where it's a nonviolent love, love with no violence. And, every major world religion has their different formation of the highest sort of love, and that's what each path is working its way to. And I and at this stage in this experience, I'm really viewing everything as, it's the best way to put it. It's as if this highest formation of love already exists in its perfect form, and has separated from itself and split off into 8 billion different observations that we call human beings. And each one is on their own path of cultivation, working its way back from where it originally came. And that underlying need for love is within all of us at all times. So when we speak to one another, and I speak to you, or I speak to even my 18-month-old daughter, or I speak to the guys at work, what I'm really doing is I'm speaking to aspects of myself in search of myself, and in search of this highest formation of love. And what I have is the opportunity to show others what I have cultivated so far, and that they also have the capacity to cultivate, and to be open about that, and to be transparent about that, and to be honest about that in everything that I do, everything. And people are drawn to that. People are naturally drawn to your transparency of suffering, because everybody suffers and nobody just wants to admit it. Everybody wants to put on this Facebook face and say that I don't suffer and I'm okay. And you could have the most beautiful imagery of just think of a beautiful woman or a beautiful man or a beautiful family or a beautiful home. And you don't know the suffering that goes on in the minds of people, because confusion is inherent within all of us. You know, we try to fill, I shouldn't even say fill, we try to avoid the constant nudging of meaninglessness and purposelessness with money and with work and with jobs and with drama and with movies and with music and with things to do and with putting on a pretentious version of ourselves for everybody else to buy. And if anybody else can buy it, then that's good enough for me, right? You know, that's how I used to live. If I could present myself in such a fashion that what you perceived, you believed to be truthful, then that would be truthful to me, right? And it's no wonder why I got wrapped up in the drugs and alcohol the way that I did. I just didn't accept myself. I didn't accept reality for what it was. I didn't, I wanted others to see a version of me that I was trying to sell them, I guess is the best way that I can put that. And, and then I got sober, and then, the underlying condition of the phenomena in my unconscious arena became known. And when the unconscious became conscious, a lot of my life began to make sense. And a lot of the things that I used to do began to make sense, why I would engage in certain activities. And it was as if I was personifying this unknown, unconscious presence before. Because if you look at what drugs are and what drugs do and what alcohol does and what the phenomenon does and what the voices do, they're very similar, right? So we hear voices and we experience a phenomenon that, it will assimilate to the identity that you give it. It's completely unwilling to identify itself. I have yet to speak to one single person that has had the voices confidently and honestly identify themselves to that person with any bit of empirical evidence. It just doesn't happen. So you have these voices that are going to assume whatever identity that you give them, right? And not only will they assume the identity that you give them, but they will take on the role of that identity and reenact it. So if you give them the identity of local police, then you're going to have some stuff go down around you that would be perceivably the action of local police. If you believe it to be your neighbors, you're going to have stuff start happening in your home that you're going to believe it is your neighbors doing. If you believe that it is the government or the CIA, well, you're going to have stuff start happening in your life that could be perceivably done by the CIA or the government. If you believe it's demons, you better believe you're going to start experiencing demonic activity, because this is just how this phenomenon goes. That's why they call it a phenomenon, right? But the power that it has is the power that you give to it and you assign to it. The role that it has and the title that it has is the title and the role that you assign to it, right? So don't give it one, right? Drugs are the same exact way, right? We think that drugs or alcohol has power over us, when really, if I have, I have a bottle of kombucha here right now, but let's say that this is alcohol, right? And I put this bottle of alcohol right here, okay? On its own, it will expire. It'll go sour, it'll go bad, it'll start getting moldy, and it'll, it needs me to have any power and influence whatsoever. Without me, it doesn't have any power, right? I give it power. I give it control, not the other way around. Don't ever get that twisted. And it's the same way with the voices in this phenomenon. The amount of power that it has is the amount of power that we give to it. And I say that, even understanding with a lot of these symptoms that we go through, right? People are being touched. People are being choked. People are being pinched. They're being zapped. They're being, my anxiety attack the other day, right? Still, in that moment when that is happening, it is still of the utmost importance to call it a liar. It really is. It is of the utmost importance in that moment when that is happening to call bullshit and say that's an illusion. I'm not required to believe any of that. Because if you feed into it, it's that much worse. It really is. Every single time, if you feed into the fear and if you feed into the paranoia and if you feed into the delusion and the illusion that it's trying to portray, and you feed into the identity that it wishes to assume and assimilate to, it will only get worse. Guaranteed. I guarantee that 100%. The more that you feed it, the worse that it will get. You know, it's a trickle effect like everything else, even with the drugs and the alcohol coming off of that. You know, the first few months, a lot of people, you got to white knuckle it because your brain is constantly consumed. I want to drink. I want to do drugs. I want to drink. But then it gets better. Right. As time goes on, it gets better. You think about it less. It's not as much of a thing. It's not consuming so much of your mental space. You can go places freely without having to worry about taking a drink or a drug when you go there. You're not worried about your behavior. Will you slip up? Will you embarrass yourself? And it's the same thing. There's a lot of similarities between drug and, between addiction, any addiction really, and the way that this thing works, the way that this phenomenon works. And in my head, I refer to the phenomena as the mechanism, and that's taken on a lot of different roles. It went from I had all the voices named and gave them personalities and backstories and a narrative and a plot. And then eventually it went to they and them and you. And then it went to it. And now it's just a mechanism. I view it as just sort of this underlying mechanism that has no real agenda. Its only intention is to be Samsara's mouthpiece, I guess is the best way to put it. And if you don't know what Samsara is, in Buddhism, Samsara is the illusion, the world of illusion, and of cause and effect. To be caught in the world of cause and effect over and over and over again, and to be stuck in this state of reincarnation, and in dukkha, which is suffering. So samsara, it might be a good term to look up. And if I look at my experience, like I was just saying with the moon, the waxing and the waning and the tide, and, it's very cyclical. I'm still kind of going through that wax and wane, samsara of the whole thing. And the voices, they're just talking about nonsense, worldly nonsense. That's all they talk about. The same as what I would assume that Jesus heard when he was out in the desert. The same as what I'm assuming Buddha heard. The same as what I'm assuming most people that have gone to that brink of mental psychosis have heard and have pushed through, before really attaining a sense of enlightenment and awakening in this world. And what I really just want to, with this video is, encourage and implore everybody to push through to the top of that tornado and get spit out, get ejected out the top of it. I don't know what stage of that tornado you're in right now. The bottom of it where everything's very tightly wound and you're still relapsing and you're still messing up and you're still being very immature about this whole thing and getting wrapped up in a lot of nonsense online and certain communities that you shouldn't be in. Or if you're in the middle of the tornado, maybe it's kind of opening up for you at this point and you're like, oh, maybe this isn't what I thought it was. And that's not a bad place to be. You can actually kind of start getting your life back at that point and maybe look for a job and start, really start rehabilitating. Or you're at the top of the tornado, where you're looking down at everything else and you're able to speak with confidence about everything else that's happening below you. And you're just kind of very slowly going around the top of this thing, so it's kind of where I'm at now with this whole thing. So I always had this, impression that enlightenment would be like this blissful, euphoric undertaking, that it would be this joyous, miraculous, rapturous event that would take place in my life. And it's painful. Like what it really is, it's the unraveling of who you were. That's what it really is. It's the taking of everything that you've ever known, everything that you ever thought you were, everything that you ever thought others thought you were, and it puts it all under trial, puts it all, under a microscope, and forces your face into it, and really makes you examine everything that you once believed to be truth, everything that you once believed to have some sort of a foundation in this world that you could stand firm on and move forward in life confidently and speak with confidence, as shattered. And that, that's what enlightenment is the ability to doubt everything with confidence.